I've always been drawn to fossils, those silent witnesses to lost worlds. And some fossils, they tell stories that go far beyond just science. They speak of agony, of the brutal struggle for survival, and sometimes of truly shocking ends. I remember reading about one site in particular, now known as the Drowning Cemetery. More than 10,000 bones of a single species were found in one place. 10,000 Centrosaurus, a medium-sized herbivore from the late Cretaceous period. It paints a macabre picture of a moment of natural horror, frozen in time. These Centrosaurus, they moved together, a herd acting with the rhythm of centuries of behavioral evolution. They lived about 76 million years ago. They were impressive creatures, with a large nasal horn and an ornamented frill, symbols of power, perhaps even victims of their own evolution. They meet about 6 meters long and weighed over 2 tons, adapted to life in groups. But it was this very group dynamic that sealed their fate. The area where their bones were found, in southern Alberta, Canada, was once a floodplain near an ancient river. But on that fateful day, torrential rain transformed their familiar territory into chaos. Mud, raging currents, despair. The saturated ground began to collapse. Caught by surprise, the Centrosaurus tried to flee, but the mass escape only led to more destruction. Those at the front fell first, many trampled by panicked companions. Others were swept away by the flood, dragged into lower areas, and buried alive by the mud. Some, the younger or weaker, simply couldn't keep up. Death was swift for some, slow and agonizing for others. What remained was a tangled mass of bodies, compressed under tons of flesh, bone, and earth. Then silence. Decomposition gave way to fossilization. Horror turned into geological record. Millions of years later, paleontologists would excavate that soil with brushes and spatulas, revealing an unprecedented discovery. Over 10,000 bones belonging to a single species in a single location. The Drowning Cemetery had been revealed. The scientists' interpretation was immediate and brutal. This wasn't the result of deaths occurring over generations. This was a single event, a sudden catastrophe that wiped out an entire herd. The uniformity of the fossils, the lack of erosion on the bones, the absence of signs of predation confirmed it. Everything screamed urgency, desperation, tragedy. Then there's the story of a Triceratops horridus. Imagine this animal, more than 9 meters long, weighing between 6 and 12 tons, slowly walking across the plains of a lost world. It had 3 sharp horns on its face, and a protective bony frill rising behind its skull. It was one of the last dinosaurs to inhabit the Earth before the mass extinction event around 66 million years ago. Among the many fossils discovered, one tells a particularly dark story, marked by pain, survival, and violence. What caught the paleontologist's attention wasn't just the well-preserved skull, but the perforations located in vulnerable areas of the facial bone. These perforations, when analyzed, revealed a specific pattern, a curvature, a spacing, a depth compatible with only one living creature of that time, Tyrannosaurus Rex. The powerful jaws of this predator could exert a force of more than 5 tons, enough to crush bone and tear away chunks of flesh. But what makes this case so intriguing is that the Triceratops didn't die at the moment of the attack. The bone surrounding the perforations shows clear signs of irregular growth, a biological reaction to the body's attempt to heal, an inflamed type of bone callus, typical of infection. The Triceratops survived. This discovery changes the traditional narrative of the late Cretaceous food chain. Instead of a simple predation scene, we're faced with a more complex drama. The attack, survival, infection, continuous pain, and finally a slow death. The skull becomes a witness not only to a brutal fight, but also to the resilience of a wounded animal struggling to carry on. The infection that settled into the perforations of the skull was severe. The disorganized bone growth indicates that the body reacted however it could. This inflammatory response is a clear sign that it lived for several weeks after the attack, perhaps even months. Every movement of the jaw, every bite of leaves or branches must have caused pain. And then there's the fossil known as the fighting dinosaurs. In the heart of the Gobi Desert, one of the most inhospitable regions on the planet, lies one of the most dramatic testimonies of the age of dinosaurs, a moment frozen more than 70 million years ago, where life and death became intertwined in a fierce dance. Protoceratops versus Velociraptor. Two names, two destinies sealed in a confrontation as brutal as it was intimate. On one side, Protoceratops, a medium-sized herbivore with a large bony frill and a beak sharp as scissors. There's a fossil that reveals something beyond just names and shapes. It reveals the precise instant of combat. I'm thinking of a velociraptor, leg raised, driving its killing claw into the neck of a Protoceratops. The herbivore, in response, bites down hard on the attacker's arm. Both immobilized, locked in a final struggle. There was no victor. The outcome was mutual death. The sand, rich in minerals and compacted over time, became an extraordinary agent of preservation. The fossil preserved not only the bones, but also maintained their relative positions. The limbs, the teeth, the claws, everything is there, frozen, as if time itself had paused to record the raw ferocity of nature. In the arid heart of what is now Montana, about 66 million years ago, one of the most brutal confrontations of the Cretaceous period reached its end. It's where the supreme predator, Tyrannosaurus Rex, met its end in a shocking way. Its name echoes through museum halls as a symbol of both violence and fragility. I'm thinking of a fossil nicknamed Pex Rex, M980, that tells a story unlike any other. When scientists analyzed the fossilized skeleton of this Tyrannosaurus Rex, they found something extraordinary. A massive puncture wound in the neck, exactly where vital arteries, the trachea, and crucial muscles are located. It was as if someone had driven a spear with devastating force straight into the animal's vital system. But this spear wasn't metal. It was bone, the horn of a Triceratops. I can almost see the scene in the minds of paleontologists. A close-quarters confrontation, a decisive strike, a hunting attempt gone wrong. The greatest terrestrial predator of its era became the prey. Bone fragments around the puncture indicate the impact was deep. So deep that it pierced soft tissues and likely perforated the trachea. There are no signs of healing at the site of the wound, meaning the blow was fatal, or at least the direct cause of death. The fossil M980 was discovered in 1997 by a geologist named Bob Harmon while excavating a region known for its Cretaceous deposits. The nickname Peck's Rex was given in honor of Louis Peck, the owner of the ranch where the fossil was found. Since then, Peck's Rex has fascinated scientists and the public alike because of its story, because of its end, because of its silent message written into every fracture, every shattered bone. In many parts of the world, paleontologists have unearthed dinosaur cemeteries with skeletons tangled together, as if the animals died trying to escape. And that is exactly what happened. They tried to flee, to survive, but there was no time. Sandstorms, violent floods, mudslides, sudden and merciless natural forces that transformed the landscape in the blink of an eye. Those who lived there were swallowed alive by the very environment they once called home. These fossil sites reveal something rare, moments of prehistoric life frozen in time, not in isolation, but in community. Entire dinosaur families, from juveniles to adults, are preserved side by side, their deaths bearing witness to an instant of collective panic. These weren't natural deaths spread out over time. They were sudden events, catastrophic moments when nature turned against its own children with devastating fury. In China, within the Yixian Formation, entire groups of Psittacosaurus, small bipedal herbivores, have been found piled together in layers of volcanic sediment. All evidence suggests they were buried alive by ash from a sudden eruption. In Mongolia, sandstorms engulfed dinosaurs mid-motion. Their poses, preserved within the desert, reveal final attempts to escape an inevitable death. In Madagascar, a mudslide captured an entire group of Majungasaurus, feared predators that, according to the evidence, had no time to fight back. They were crushed, immobilized, preserved. And what about discoveries in North America? In locations such as the Morrison Formation, the remains of Diplodocus and other sauropods appear grouped, suggesting entire herds were wiped out at once by sudden floods. These sites allow us to see beyond death. They show us how dinosaurs lived, how they organized themselves into herds, families, and social structures, and how even in groups they were vulnerable to the power of nature. In the petrified silence of time, when the world was still ruled by gigantic reptiles, a tragedy unfolded beneath the darkened skies of ancient North America. These bones belonged to Pachyrhinosaurus, a gregarious herbivore whose head was adorned with thick bony bosses rather than sharp horns. But it is not this animal's appearance that draws attention. It is the way it died. Paleontologists excavating a vast rock formation in what is now Alberta, Canada, encountered a macabre scene. Dozens of Pachyrhinosaurus fossils stacked atop one another, with bones crushed and fractured. Imagine the scene. Dozens of tons of flesh and bone, collapsing, crushing. It's a herd death, a natural catastrophe that ironically preserves fossils so well. These aren't just scattered bones. They're a record of panic, of a force so intense and prolonged that it shattered skeletons. The fractures don't suggest a simple fall or a predator's attack. Instead, they speak of a stampede, a chaotic flight from something terrifying. Compression marks tell the story. These animals, driven mad by fear, collided with each other in a desperate, futile attempt to escape. A predator might have triggered it, or perhaps a wildfire, a sudden storm. In the chaos, some fell, others stumbled. The weight of the herd became a deadly force for the weakest, the most unlucky. Juveniles, adults, even hatchlings, a family, a social unit wiped out in an instant. These Tyrannosaurus, peaceful herbivores despite their size, likely cared for their young, maybe forming defensive circles like modern elephants. But no defense can stand against sheer panic. Not all died instantly. Some fossils show healed fractures, signs that individuals survived for a time, even with broken bones. Others bear the marks of acute, lethal trauma. The microfractures reveal a force not from above, as in a landslide, but from all directions, as if the bodies were compressed within a living mass of desperation. Then there's the Carnotaurus, the meat-eating bull, a fearsome predator that roamed South America 70 million years ago. Even kings, I've learned, have their weaknesses. And sometimes a silent fossil whispers a story of pain, struggle, and defeat. This particular Carnotaurus fossil held a mystery in its jaw, a significant, unhealed fracture. The break was clear, deep, compromising the entire side of its mouth, crippling its ability to hunt, to feed, to survive. Paleontologists immediately recognized the severity. It wasn't a superficial fracture, but a severe rupture in the lower jawbone. This would have caused immense pain, made even basic movements difficult. What struck me most was the absence of healing. Usually, a surviving animal's bones show the growth of new tissue, the formation of calluses, the body's attempt to restore itself. But this fracture was raw, as if it happened just before death. This led to a grim conclusion. The Carnotaurus died shortly after the injury, possibly from starvation. A predator, once relentless, reduced to a weakened shadow, unable to bite, each jaw movement sending waves of pain. Pushed out of its territory, abandoned by prey, maybe even by its own kind. Imagine that suffering. And then another king, Tyrannosaurus Rex. In Montana, a fossil revealed something unprecedented about this apex predator. Bite marks on its own bones, inflicted by another Tyrannosaurus Rex. This discovery, unsettling as it is, sheds light on their behavior in ways we could only imagine. These aren't the marks of a smaller predator. They match the robust, deeply penetrating teeth of another tyrannosaur. It forces us to reconsider everything: cannibalism, a territorial dispute, or a meal where opportunity outweighed restraint. To understand this, we must remember who Tyrannosaurus Rex was. 13 meters long, 4 meters tall at the hips, with a jaw capable of exerting 6 tons of pres. It wasn't just a predator, it was a bone crusher. Wolves, for example, sometimes kill members of rival packs and then feed on them. In this light, Tyrannosaurus Rex ceases to be merely a killing machine. It becomes an animal with complex social behaviors, where extreme violence was just one aspect of survival.